Hey, what's up? We're back again with another video. Today, we are going to be talking about class-specific utility in Mythic Plus and just like the general future of Mythic Plus with class-specific utility as a whole. Basically, I feel like there's been a fundamental design shift for how the developers of World of Warcraft see how Mythic Plus and the utility that goes into Mythic Plus is currently shaping up. And they've done a couple things to change it as a whole, and we're going to talk about some of those things that they've done to change it, and what does that really mean for like group compositions going into Shadowlands. Does that actually change anything? Is there going to be like a super shakeup in the meta? That kind of thing. So that's the aim of this, and it's off the back of a couple of changes. So first and foremost, we basically learned recently that Battle Shout, Arcane Intellect, and Fortitude scrolls are going to be removed. The Engineering Battle Res, it seems like it's not coming back. And then drums have been nerfed from 15%, nerfed to 15% haste from 25% haste, where Bloodlust is currently 30% haste. Basically, this makes them half as effective as like a normal Bloodlust, like the class-specific effect. So, in conclusion, we take this Wowhead article. It says basically, if you want a battle res, you must bring a Death Knight, Druid, or Warlock. If you want 5% stamina, you must bring a Priest. If you want 5% attack power, you must bring a Warrior. Intellect, you must bring a Mage. Magic damage debuff is Demon Hunter specific. Physical damage debuff is Monk specific. If you want Lust, it's Mage, Hunter, or Shaman. Basically, those things are all going away, and now they're being replaced with, like, they're not actually being replaced at all. They are only left with class-specific alternatives, which makes me wonder, like, why they didn't change Shroud, really. But, like, why not remove invisibility potions or the ability to be able to invis and make Shroud slash generic stealths be, like, the only way that you can actually do that? I wonder why they didn't do that. That's one of the things that we're also going to talk about. So basically, with all these things that has occurred, let's kind of go down this list real quick. Actually, no. Let's start with the least impactful first. Class-specific buffs. I think as a whole, the stamina, attack power, intellect, magic damage debuff, physical damage debuff, 5% bonus damage, especially in a 5-person party. Like, these are only impactful towards Mythic Plus. I think that should be said immediately, is that these are mostly affected towards Mythic Plus. And the reason is that in Raid, you're going to more often than not have a spec that brings this. But I guess if you actually are lacking a Mage, a Warrior, a Priest in your raid, you're now going to be substantially hampered to the point where you have to bring one. So there is going to be compositional requirements now, which involve probably all of these in some form or fashion, all of this unique utility. And you can no longer get away with scrolling stamina if you don't want to bring a Priest, or scrolling attack power if you don't want to bring a Warrior. I think this one's probably the most common, scrolling attack power if you don't want to bring a Warrior. But yeah, so now for Raid, these classes are basically mandatory because there is no world that whatever DPS class you bring is going to be able to outdamage the 5% magic damage gain from a Demon Hunter, or going to be able to outdamage the 5% physical damage gain from Monk if you actually have a decent amount of physical damage. So now these buffs they used to be like pretty close to mandatory. Some cases you could get away with scrolling off the buff, like notably attack power. Now it's like no longer the case. Now you like almost have to absolutely have the buff. And right. Mythic Plus, however, significantly less important, just because it's a 5-person party. Basically, this means that you're not going to end up losing all that much, and the opportunity cost is not super high because you don't. you're not one player providing a buff for 14 other DPS. You instead are one player providing a buff for 4 other people, or 5 people, basically. So just the amount of throughput that you're going to be gaining relative to the rest of your party is going to be lower too. Especially since, as well, people do like mixed damage sources. Like, your party is more often than not probably not going to be like all physical damage or all magic damage, so you're not going to get like 100% value out of AI. You're not going to get 100% value out of Battle Shout, that kind of thing. So these buffs are very important in Raid now. Like, absolutely mandatory in Raid. Less important in Mythic Plus. Not even less important than the previous were in Mythic Plus, but this change is not the end-all be-all for Mythic Plus. And that should be explicitly stated. I think actually for all of these changes in Raid, all of this utility is mandatory now. Like, you have to have at least 1 or 2 people who bring this utility in some form or facet, because there's no way that you can actually get around it with some slightly inferior alternative. And so now basically all this is mandatory. But the main focus of this is dungeons. For Bloodlust, this is probably the most... Actually, no. I want to talk about Battle Res first. Because Battle Res, I think, is probably going to be one of the more controversial ones. DK, Druid, and Warlock have access to Battle Res. Basically, now they've removed Engineering Battle Res. That puts healer specs that don't have access into a Battle Res in a really weird spot where they are completely reliant on another character to be able to bring the Battle Res to a group, such as a Death Knight, a Druid, a DPS Druid, or Tank Druid, and then a Warlock. That puts the healers, I think, more the burden of them. It kind of creates an awkward situation where Resto Druid can seem substantially more favored just because of how this Battle Res ends up working out because of the removal of the Engineering Battle Res. Elismir actually made an interesting post on the Competitive WoW subreddit, but basically the core of the problem is that this right here, while you feel like, and basically the Blizzard developer changes for all of these are wanting to increase diversity among all of the classes, all the specs, really make you feel like you are sacrificing, or in addition to that, bringing something extra to where like you feel really good about it. And they hope that it increases diversity. The counter argument for Battle Res is that it actually decreases diversity because it actually allows fewer specs or classes to be brought, because Battle Res feels like seemingly mandatory utility. And so I guess that's part of the problem, is that like you end up defining it as like, what is mandatory utility? All of these buffs right here, these are just damage or stamina or attack power. Are they mandatory utility though for Mythic Plus? No, they're not. Battle Res, however, you could actually make an argument that Battle Res is mandatory utility. However, the counter argument is just don't die, forehead. For me, it's really awkward that I don't know, man. It's a weird line that you end up walking. So if you want my personal opinion, I think that I preferred a slightly more homogenized version of classes for Mythic Plus that allowed classes to have some strengths and some weaknesses, but generally, like, you're not going to be completely hampered by your ability to run like one specific comp, right? But I think with the removal of Engineering Battle Res, that really puts some healers like Restoration Shaman, Holy Priest, Disc Priest, Mistweaver Monk, basically every fucking healer that's not a Resto Druid, in a really awkward spot where they don't have a Battle Res. And Battle Res is, according to Elismir's post on Competitive WoW, mandatory. I'm not exactly sure if I agree that it is mandatory, but I think that it is very heavily encouraged utility, and I think that they probably should not have removed the Engineering Battle Res. And the precedent for that has been set by drums. Basically, that's part of what I want to talk about as well. So I actually get this question a lot about, so the stock of Bloodlust classes is going to go up in Mythic Plus now, right? Because Bloodlust is more valuable as a buff. I don't generally think that Bloodlust is mandatory utility in Mythic Plus the same way even a Battle Res would be. And for me, I think that it is just an insult to the system to actually leave drums in the game. And I think that they actually should remove drums, which is probably a hot take, right? I think with how this system actually ends up functioning, they have completely removed the physical damage, or they've completely removed attack power scrolls, completely removed stamina scrolls, completely removed Engineering Battle Res, nerfed drums. I think that the logical conclusion here is to actually remove drums for the exact same reasons that you have removed these other buffs and other changes, and make it uniform mandatory utility. I think it, again, I think that I prefer a more homogenized game where the accessibility of players and groups is substantially higher, and you're not actually looking for a couple of classes or a couple of specs, and instead you would rather take the player that you deem is better in Mythic Plus. I believe that that is normally what I prefer from dungeons, from Mythic Plus, where you're actually actively picking what you believe is the better player and not picking almost uniformly based on class. But considering the fact that these changes are going through, I can't really have it my way. So I actually think that they should remove drums and make this utility feel, I don't even say more mandatory, but actually feel like you're actively losing something. Because, right, as it currently stands, this Bloodlust change does not make these classes more desired. This Bloodlust change just means that you're still going to be using drums. right? And that's, I think, part of the problem. Whereas like the battle res, there is no NG alternative, right? There's literally zero alternative. It's not that engineering is worse battle res. It's that there's literally zero alternative, and I think that is like an insult to the system. But yeah, all in all, though, I think that Blizzard is definitely going in the wrong direction with how this class-specific utility ends up functioning. I'll say it again. I prefer something that is more accessible to players, where you're actively picking players that are bring the player, not the class kind of stuff, right? But right now, Blizzard has made a lot of decisions that are directly aimed at Raid and at Mythic Plus, where they want a more diverse group composition, and they believe that diverse group compositions are more valuable than anything else. So they are forcing you to at least bring a couple of different buffs in Raid. These are basically mandatory. Basically, everything here is mandatory in Raid. You're required to have one of each of these in Raid now. Mythic Plus now, you actively are giving up or gaining something to be able to gain another thing. And then that comes down to the question of how mandatory do you believe Battle Res is versus how mandatory do you believe Bloodlust is. I think that everybody would agree, though, that these damage gain buffs are not as impactful, though, as something like Bloodlust or Battle Res. I actually don't normally think that Bloodlust is like that important for Mythic Plus unless it's enabling pulls or enabling unique and new strategies. But there are situations where Bloodlust is actually incredibly strong. So I'm willing. I want to actually hear what you guys have to think about this whole entire thing. Do you think, along the same lines of me, is like if they're going to be making these changes, they should actually just go at the extra step and completely remove drums to make sure that everything is uniform? Do you think that they should actually come back on this and actually add in back the fortified scrolls, or back the fort scrolls, back the attack power scrolls, like add back in all the scrolls, and then on top of that, give you the buff from Demon Hunter and Monk to be more accessible, and bring back the battle res to where everybody has more accessibility to all stuff? Something that I actually alluded to but didn't actually hit on very much. Why is Shroud being competed with now Invisibility Potion, but not only Invisibility Potion, but now Engineering Belt Tinker has a stealth on it as well? There's like basically a stealth on the Engineering Belt. Why does that exist, but Rogue Utility isn't unique? Again, that there's no uniformity, which is where I end up questioning like what is the real purpose of this, and I wonder what they should do as a result. I've given my thoughts on the matter. I actually really want to hear your guys' thoughts on the matter down in the description. Do you think that they should make Bloodlust like completely unique? Do you think that there is something to be gained by bring the class, not the player? Or do you think that they are going too far in the wrong direction? Do you think that they're going in the correct direction? What are your guys' thoughts on just the general state of where Mythic Plus is focused? And I actually am willing to listen. I want to read all the comments and see all the different perspectives on this, because I feel like there's a lot of unique perspectives on this, and I don't think any of them are right or wrong. I think they're just different. Please be civil in the comment section, and I'll see you guys in the next video.